Hey y'all, and welcome to Politibrawl. My name is Brian, and Russell Fry from South Carolina gives Dan Goldman way more than he can possibly handle and calls out his own hypocrisy with this shocking video about Alvin Bragg. Let's dive in.
The Republicans have doubled, tripled, quadrupled down on, in fealty to Donald Trump, that somehow these were political prosecutions and investigations. And the only evidence of that is that the defendant said it. That's all you have. You have no actual evidence of any politicization or weaponization.
Well, Mr.
If you look,
sir,
I reclaim my time. If you look at the actual indictments, if you look at the Mar-a-Lago search warrant, there is not an objective judge, prosecutor, or anyone else who understands criminal law who would say there's not enough evidence to charge or to go forward with the search warrant. And all you are doing is trying to create a monarchy for Donald Trump. And that's what you have been doing by yielding all of your power to him for the last 6 weeks.
The gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize the gentleman from South Carolina.
Let me just write the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I think it was discussed earlier that this was not about politics and that people campaigning for district attorneys were not campaigning on going after the former president, now current president. But that, of course, is belied by the evidence, and I think we have a video to show just that.
Whoever has this job, are they going to convict Donald Trump?
Look, that is the number one issue. I'm the candidate in the race who has the experience with Donald Trump. We sued the Trump administration over 100 times.
I sued Trump over 100 times and brought a case against the Trump Foundation and held him accountable.
Holding Trump accountable for the Trump Foundation.
From exposing illegal behavior by the Trump Foundation.
I do have a lot of experience with the former president. I led the New York State Attorney General's work and investigation and successful litigation against him and his family for their misconduct with the Trump Foundation. And also we had a number of litigations, more than 100, involving the Trump administration. I led the team that held Trump and his children accountable for their misconduct with the Trump Foundation. I oversaw the work which sued his administration more than 100 times. I led the Attorney General's work on the Trump Foundation case, where we held Trump and his family accountable. When I was at the Attorney General's office, I led our work on the Trump Foundation matter. I also led the team that did the Trump Foundation case, and I've seen him up front and seen the lawlessness that he can do. Started out as a civil rights lawyer, then became a federal prosecutor, ultimately was the #2 lawyer in the New York State Attorney General's office, leading the charge against the racist policies of the Trump administration. I believe we have to hold him accountable. I've litigated with him, and so I'm prepared to go where the facts take me once I see them and hold him accountable. Being a rich old white man has allowed you to evade accountability in Manhattan. That includes Trump and his children, right? We held him accountable in the Trump Foundation case. My office did the Trump University case. So I've seen a pattern of lawlessness over 20 years. And so I'm inclined to believe all I see in the public domain and know that and believe that there's a path forward there to make a case.
So I think we go back to the basic premise of the bill, is that you have a prosecutor in New York who's not worried about crime in New York, Manhattan. He is worried about going after the former president of the United States. Why? Because it earns him political points in a jurisdiction that did not vote for Donald Trump. And so they elected this guy to go after him, despite the fact that there are other crimes that you could be going after, but resources are dedicated. And so to sit here today and say that this has not been about politics, this is about fairness in the system, it's total BS to believe that that is actually the case, because he said it 1,000,000 times on television. He campaigned on it, and that is the purpose. One of the huge purposes of this bill is to remove that from a fairness perspective.
Oh man, Danny really stepped in it on this one. This was an easy landmine to miss. There's quite literally a patch of dirt that has a little flag on top of it that says, "Do not step on this." And he decided to step on it anyways. And so this dude thinks it's a really good idea to talk about the actual indictment process. Reminder, folks, Alvin Bragg didn't just run on the ideas of going after President Trump, okay? That wasn't just his own shtick. That's not just the way he got into power. He got into power because the Democrat Party as a whole has lost its mind and lost its soul. Compare that to the Republican Party, which, by the way, I've got to deal with a little side note here. Dan Goldman decided to get in front of Congress and start talking about pledging fealty to Trump. That's something called self-correction, ladies and gentlemen. The reason that the Republican Party has shifted to the Trump circles that now dominates it today is because they realized that they have been had. All right, there's been a great game, and they're playing a couple of cards shy of a 52-card deck. Okay, the Republican Party has been outflanked by liberals. We have taken the very idea of federalism, the very idea of big government is now, it has now been shredded to its core, and we have delegated so much back to the states, and now the states are returning the favor by being captured by leftist ideologues. In this case, Alvin Bragg is one of them. There's a whole multitude of Democrat states that are run like this. All right, you have New York State, as in the case of Alvin Bragg, California, Illinois, New Mexico, and even Hawaii. Although Hawaii gets a pass because of the Jones Act, you'll never hear me degrading the way that state is run, mainly because of a really bad federal policy that was passed back in 1920. But when it comes to Dan Goldman and talking about the Republican Party pledging fealty to Trump, yeah, that's because we've realized that there's a huge problem. That's because leftist ideologues, Marxists, all right, communists, I don't throw these terms around lightly, but we have been outflanked, even in our own education system, by these ideological nutbags. And then Dan Goldman is decrying the law that's being argued about right there. Stephen Fry, Stephen Fry's an actor. Russell Fry, out of South Carolina, gives a fantastic defense of something that Dan Goldman isn't even really talking about here. And it's H.R. 1789. And this law would allow a current or former president or vice president to remove to a federal court in a civil or criminal action prosecution brought against them in a state court. And it continues. Under current law, the option for removal is limited to cases where the defendant is a federal official or an officer of the legislative or judicial branch acting in an official capacity. So in other words, the law that they're arguing over is escalating from a state court, which can be captured, which can have other motives entirely, and can undermine the very ideals of democracy. When you vote for a president, that's everyone's vote, all right? Donald Trump got over 78 million votes, won all 7 of the swing states, and yet the Democrats are still looking to litigate him and use lawfare against him wherever they possibly can. All because he represents a major shift in Republican policies and ideals, because we've recognized that, we've got to change our strategy up because the Democrats somehow are beating us at our own game. And that's, again, that's a deep dive that I could go on for about an hour into a much longer segment. But the important thing here is that Russell Fry is brought forth and is arguing for a piece of legislation that would actually allow the president's and the vice president's office to have the same exact powers of the majority of other federal officials. Apparently, this doesn't even go up the ladder. This only defends certain lawmakers. It only defends a small part of the federal. Okay, not a small part. I got that wrong. It defends a large part of the bureaucracy, but it doesn't defend the president or the vice president. And I currently, in this political climate, do not trust certain states to do their jobs properly and to keep their hands out of federal issues. We've seen what happens at the I'm getting tongue-tied on this one. But we've seen what happens over and over and over again with Democrat states is they try to escalate issues. We have seen district courts at the federal level try to litigate what can and can't be done when it comes to foreign policy. This is a problem, ladies and gentlemen. This is a problem, a flaw in federalism. And instead of recognizing that flaw, Dan Goldman is out here parading about, oh, well, you've just pledged fealty to Trump like he's a king. Oh, give me a break. You have got to give me a break on this one. I'm tired of that talking point. I'm tired of that nonsense, and I'm tired of watching Democrat attorneys magically come out of the woodwork and then bring up a case that even the former prosecutors said, no, there isn't anything real here, and the only reason Trump is considered a felon is because a grand jury was quite literally told to disregard direct evidence that absolved President Trump at the time. So yeah, that's why we picked a convicted felon, ladies and gentlemen. The Democrats love using lawfare, and it's cases like this, it's resolutions like this, it's laws that Russell Fry is arguing for that can protect us from these ridiculous auspices that will continue to degrade our democracy. I am terrified of what happens when the American Republic experiment finally comes to a close. I'm terrified that we are at that precipice. We are not ready for Caesar, but for good grief, can we at least get an opposition political party that has a couple of brain cells to rub together before they continue on this terrible course that will lead to more chaos, more destruction, and ultimately the end of our democracy? That's what they were claiming that they were defending so vehemently. And now it seems that by their refusal to work on this House resolution, that they will continue to deride and degrade the American experiment until something new is created. That terrifies me, ladies and gentlemen. But let me know down in the comments below if I'm being obtuse or not. But I know for a fact Dan Goldman definitely is here. My name is Brian. Hope you enjoyed that segment here on Politibrawl. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you on the next one. Until then, y'all have a good one.